When was the last time you were in hospital?
2 days ago.
I'm not talking about you.
I just got to answer.
Anyway, well, we want to take a look at the health sector this time in our series of previewing and projecting into the year ahead. Today, we want to take on the health sector. And to do that with us, we have the former president of Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria with us here, Dr. Olumide Akintayo. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have the publicity secretary of the NMA FCT chapter and President Association of Resident Doctors in our Abuja studio, Dr. Roland Aigwevo. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Aigwevo. Please open by telling us what your assessment is of the health sector in the year that is ending in a few days.
Okay, thank you for having me this morning. The assessment is really not too good by what is on ground, as like you rightly said, as for us to still accept what has been done in the health sector for the year 2019, which is winding up now. There have been, like I've always said, a lot of movement, really, a lot of actions, but not the one that is actually geared towards providing the basic healthcare package for Nigerians. And having the target of 2030 to achieve universal health coverage, there's actually nothing on ground that actually show that, yes, we've started something towards that direction. And we have just less than how many years left to that. And these, I think the major problem here is that health have not been prioritized in government, by the government, and this is really something that actually needs to be taken into consideration. Because when you prioritize health, and you know that health is a critical sector for you to actually invest in, it will do us a whole lot of good by setting a good example and standard towards meeting or achieve goals.
Dr. Akintayo, in 2019 in the health sector, what aspects stand out for you?
Well, let me correct the impression that I am not Dr. Akintayo.
Oh, okay.
I am simply Olumide Akintayo, a pharmacist, proud pharmacist.
Okay.
Well, you know that around there, we would usually say there's a national health policy, just like you have a national drug policy. The trust of those policies, both the national health and drug policy, is that you want to make health available, accessible, and affordable to consumers of health in Nigeria. In 2019, we have continued that unfortunate drift and march, wobbling and oscillating, vacillating towards total failure and collapse for various reasons. Just like the spokesperson of the NMA said, of course, it was a most unproductive year. The reasons are very simple. We continue to contend with extremely wretched stewardship and oversight roles from government. We continue to have very poor appointments, both in the ministry and the various MDs in health. Corruption remains a major problem in the health sector. There is underfunding. People say, oh, you have an Abuja Declaration of 2003 that prescribes a minimum health budget of 15% for African nations. There are years that we don't even have 5% national health budgets. But the critical question is, what do you even do with the little you have? And then, of course, there are emerging challenges. Because government has failed to bring healthcare to the doorstep of the consumer, it is considering all sorts of unworkable options, including concessioning and privatization of public health facilities in Nigeria. But let's put it together. The biggest of our challenges, in my view, and I've said this repeatedly, and I continue to say it, I think the Buhari government, the Buhari administration set out to fail ab initio in the health sector, and there's no tripping about this.
Why do you say that?
Yeah, I'll give you. The health sector is one particular sector where you have persistently and perennially generated a lot of entropy. It's multidisciplinary, just like what you have in the works and housing sector. And so you would imagine that if you want to balance forces, if you want to get it right, government probably needs to tinker with newer options, doing a few things differently. You cannot continue, for instance, let me just get to the point. Since the advent of the Buhari administration, you have continually had a situation whereby we have members of one profession in charge of the Federal Ministry of Health.
When you say one profession, which profession is that?
Medicine. You have a situation whereby the two ministers you have in the first tenure, Adewale and Enaire. Enaire is now full minister, and you have Dr. Mamora. In fact, it was so horrible in the first leg that we also had a permanent secretary who was a medical doctor.
But they were medical personnel. It wasn't as though they brought engineers.
No, there is no, I don't even have a problem if you bring engineers. The job is for managers and administrators.
Right.
But I am leading somewhere.
Right.
I mean, you talked about hospitals and the failure we have. You see, there is this destructive but infective delusional messianic complex that we suffer from in this society. You tend to believe that in the health sector, a medical doctor can fix everything. And it is something that has destroyed healthcare in Nigeria. And I like to substantiate that because it's a weighty statement. In the golden era of healthcare in this land of Abat, and I give you the example of the University College Hospital Ibadan. It was a 500-bed facility established in the 50s. At some point, the UCH Ibadan was actually one of the top 5 health facilities in the whole of the Commonwealth. The whole of the Commonwealth. It was led by administrators and managers who were designated as house governors. And that was the situation in most of our health facilities.
That was how long ago?
In the 50s, up till about 1985.
How did that become reversed?
In the military era, the military junta came up with an obnoxious University Teaching Hospital Act.
And you are well aware, Mr. Akintayo, that in your sector, anyone who is not used to the health sector will just say the medical profession or the health sector. For us to begin to dissect it's another thing entirely. The average person doesn't know. You go to a hospital, talk to whoever needs to help you to get well. But then, just as you have mentioned, the federal government has its role to play at every sector. Every administration has their own role to play. But there have been certain governments that have been in place, government after government, and those are the associations, the NMAs, the PSNs, the resident doctors, and all of that. What role do you think they have also played in helping or harming your sector? Because if it's not Johesu on strike, it's NMA on strike, it's resident doctors on strike, that also has a role to play.
Of course. Everything that you're talking about has to do with managerial competence. And that's exactly where I'm leading to.
On whose part?
On the part of the drivers of the health system. Because it was working.
Who are the drivers of this health system?
Of course, the way it stands today, I told you that in the glorious era of healthcare, hospital administrators epitomized by seasoned administrators and managers of cognitive experience were in charge. They were the drivers.
That was then.
Since
this is now.
Yes, now.
One moment. This is now. In what ways, specifically, have we not done well in the sector? Let's own it. And then how do we make it better going on?
Okay, fine. That's exactly what I'm leading to. If you just give me 1 minute to land. Now, you see, the problem is we came up with this obnoxious decree, Decree 10 of 1985, which literally puts the leadership of hospitals in the hands of medical doctors. Now, since then, we've had these recurring problems of the strikes you talked about, because there's been too much ineptitude and incompetence on the people who lead. when you have benefit package and all you see that it accrues to only one side of the value chain, then the others will react, and that's why you continue to contend with those strikes. But the challenge I want to send to you today is you go find out what goes on in our MDs. Today, there's a review by the ICPC, and one of the things we found out was that the health sector was one of the most corrupt in our economy. It's the same thing you talked about universal health coverage in the background to this program. Why is the national health insurance not working? You need to find out why it is not working. The first two CEOs of that scheme were administrators, Mustafa Sambo and Mohamed Leki. Since a certain Dogo Mohamed took over, a medical doctor, he took over, handed over to Femi Thomas, right, Professor Yusuf, and all of them. Right. What we have witnessed is that coverage at the inception of NHIS, which was about 5%, has dropped below 2% in the hands of these fellows.
Okay, Mr. Kitana.
I do not have a problem
right,
with anybody, but we need to begin to say these things, because no matter what you put together, the best equipment, the best infrastructure, if you do not have the right managers to drive it, you will continue to contend with failure.
Right. You have raised a lot of issues.
Oh, yes.
Fair enough. And I think it's only also fair to allow a medical doctor, who's
sure,
also a player in this field, to respond to some of the issues you have raised.
No problem.
And Dr. Agbovo is in Abuja, and I believe he has responses to some of the issues you have raised. Now, Dr. Agbovo, Mr. Kitayo here believes that one of the major issues in the health sector is the fact that, according to him, doctors seem to get the upper hand in terms of administration and what have you. He raised some other issues too, but I'd like you to start by responding to that, especially because you are a medical doctor.
All right. Ordinarily, I wouldn't have even want to respond to that because of this, there's this perceived acrimony, not perceived, there's an acrimony in the health sector within doctors and other health workers. But one thing, when you say that, okay, everything begin to go down, just as when doctors begin to head those facilities, I want to disagree with him, because the issue of healthship, for me, is a matter of interest, because everybody, or most in the health sector, will feel that, okay, because whoever is there does not belong to my profession, the person is not doing well. And okay, yes, doctors, let's be truthful to ourselves. The medical doctor is the leader of the health team. And whether we like it or not, I say that without any apology. But when it comes to administration, the issue of leadership, now, a doctor is the head of a hospital. We have other units. How well has every profession done to achieve a common goal? The goal of all of us in the health sector is to give adequate and appropriate health care services to the patient. And that is the goal, that the patient comes to the hospital, he gets the services, and he goes home happy. And each and every one of us has a role to play. Now, how well have they also played their role towards achieving this goal? It's not all about headship. Yeah, if the headship is not too good, yes, you can have negative indices that comes out, and the result might not be too palatable. But I don't want to lay the blame solely on the headship being a medical doctor. A medical doctor, by training, is an administrator, is a manager of resources. So coming to be a medical director does not mean that he doesn't have what it takes to actually lead that sector. And also, to go back to the issue of strikes. Yes, the issue of, oh, you are getting something I'm not getting, we go back and do that. We all have different training. And by virtue of our training, we deserve what we get. But when they begin to say, oh, a doctor is earning A, I should earn A. If you put a doctor and other healthcare professionals at the same scale, of course, you know that that scale does not represent what it actually is. Because, for instance, let's go to training. As a medical doctor, it takes a minimum of 6 years, not 6 semesters. A year in the curriculum is 12 calendar months, unlike others who run semesters. You understand? So if you have to take that, go by training, which they have put into place to know that, you see that it takes a whole lot to train a medical doctor. I'm not saying the doctor should be dominant or the doctor should look down on other professions. No, far from that. But what I'm saying in essence is that a doctor is the leader of the health team. And for a doctor to be at that level, he has gone through some training, both administrative and managerial, to be able to put the resources together, look for how to make things work. And that is why you have them there. And apart from that, the act, like he talked about, puts it in place that a doctor of a specified qualification as a consultant should be appointed as a medical director. And for the issue of ministers, of course, ministerial appointment and commissioner appointment and commissioner, that's purely political. It's all for them to go do what they have to do to lobby and do that. If the president has deemed it fit that a doctor should head the Ministry of Health, it doesn't mean that they don't have the competence or every other person. Every other person has the competence. It may not necessarily be a doctor. But so long as the doctor is there, does not mean that that is why we are having these negative indices.
Dr. Agbovo, so I understand both of you. Dr. Agbovo, if I can come in now, it's important that both of you speak from your perspective and point of view, which you have done. But let's speak from the point of view of the average Nigerian who is in need of healthcare. And you know we have a target to hit universal health coverage in a few years. As much as we know there are these issues, you know, amongst the ranks of, you know, the medical team, it's also important for us to focus on what the patient, the average Nigerian, needs. So let's bring ideas together. It's meant to be a team, so let's work as a team. We have a goal, universal health coverage. We're not hitting that goal as it stands right now. So while these controversies go on, there's a bigger picture ahead. So if you could give ideas, you know, things we can do to ensure that we, you know, meet this target of universal health coverage, what will they be?
All right. Like I've mentioned on several occasions, like the issue of universal health coverage. One, governments at all levels need to prioritize health. Prioritizing health means you need to understand that the health of your citizens is much more important to you. And before I even give ideas on how to do that, you know, if you take a rank of most of our political office holders or big shot directors and all those stuff, many of them don't access healthcare in Nigeria because they don't even believe in the health system. And because of that, they don't want to even invest in the health sector. Apart from that, one, to be able to achieve the basic minimum health package for health for individuals, we need to strengthen the primary health care, primary health cares. About three years ago or thereabout, where they set up the issue, a program to revitalize the primary health care with the third one at Kuchingoro and all. After that, nothing was heard about it again. And now, if we have to achieve the universal health coverage by 2030, the primary health care have to be strengthened. One. Two, the budgetary allocation for health. As it is today, the 2020 budget, what we have is about 4.1 or 4 thereabout percentage for health. And of course, you all know that that is a far cry for what is expected. You know, another thing is to increase the enrollment into the National Health Insurance Scheme. How can we do that? I've said this earlier before. I think what needs done now is there should be a form of maybe a compulsion, just as citizens are being employed into service, public service. I think that should also be, as you are being employed, just as you process your pension payment, there should be an enrollment into the NHIS, National Health Insurance Scheme. One, to increase the number of enrollment and also provide the basic minimum package by pooling of resources. This is a vehicle that will help achieve the universal health coverage. Like he mentioned, the issue of 2%, that is not what we have today. Yes, it might be less than 5% or thereabout, and certainly not 2%. I actually disagree with that 2% enrollment in the health insurance scheme. And many states are also coming up with their different packages for health insurance, which is a good one. But we need to pay attention to, one, increase enrollment, even the federal public service, the state service, and even those in the informal sector. We have to increase it because the best way, government, agree, cannot provide everything. But the best way we can actually also do this is this health insurance scheme. And we need to pull resources together. Government have to invest. We have the required human resources to drive our health sector. But the problem there is that government have failed to see that and also to invest even in the health sector. The issue of the interprofessional relationship, at least that one will be talked about. I don't want to drag too much on that. But these two key points, investment in health, increasing budgetary provision, and also increasing the enrollment in the National Health Insurance Scheme to cut across all cadre, federal, state, primary health, the local government level, and the informal sector, as well as strengthening the primary health care sector. Now, the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund of 1% Consolidated Revenue Fund allocation, which, like we all know, even in this budget, is far less than the 1%. And the primary healthcare now
Mr.
has
Igbovo,
up to like 35% of that.
let's bring this to Lagos, Mr. Igbovo. You know, you've made some amazing comments, and it's really cheering to know all of those things. So, Mr. Akitayo, let's bring this to you now. So he's talked about largely about the universal health coverage. I would expect that you want to weigh in on that as well. However, I would like you to focus on the primary health care. You know, there are 3 tiers in the health sector. To a large extent, many people, just as you heard from the background report that we gave earlier, many people would rather go to the secondary, you know, health care sector, the general hospitals and all of that, because the primary healthcare systems are not working. What needs to be done? What's the failing? What needs to be done to get the primary healthcare sector working so people don't have to go far and wide to get help?
Perhaps I should just start by commending the comportment of Dr. Igbovo. I like the way he's handled this whole segment. But we must continue to say this as children are watching us and all that. Before I go to that question, I need to clarify this. I am probably, with due modesty, one of the most familiar persons in the health sector today with all a plethora of health statutes and pharmacy statutes.
We really
and I can
don't
tell
have
you,
much time.
no, I know, I'll get to the point, I'll make the point. There is no single law in this country that establishes that doctors are leaders in healthcare. There is none. And we glamorize stupidity and promote the components of idiotism when we make these submissions.
I'd like us to be careful with,
let me tell you why I'm saying this. When you talk about health, it goes beyond the clinical setting in the hospital. Pharmaceutical manufacturing is health endeavor. It's part of this health endeavor.
We could go.
So,
one moment.
I need to clarify
One
that.
moment. We could go on a debate.
We could spend the whole day clarifying.
Yeah.
But
So
let's
I
just go
finished
to
with
the
the clarification.
issues. Yes.
Now, you see, I talked about the stewardship role of government. Why is primary health care dead? Because successive health policies makers have refused to make it a priority. Universal health
Is it
coverage.
the function of someone not making it a
Oh,
priority,
sure, it
or
is.
the function of the health workers not doing the needful?
Somebody has to drive it. If you're talking of primary health care, for instance, some of the most relevant people will be environmental health officers and all that. Somebody is denying funds from going to those areas. But I don't want to go into all of that because I will tie it through another template that I'm trying to establish. Now, if you want to achieve universal coverage, the major tool you need today is that of health insurance, one of the most viable modes of healthcare funding. But there are fundamental distortions in the way we run our own version of a social health insurance program in Nigeria. 2 of those distortions are: 1, indiscriminate capitation of health facilities. What do I mean by indiscriminate capitation? In the general concept of health insurance, you have a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper globally will be general practice doctors, or in some climes, nurses who run nursing homes and all that. Now, what you have in Nigeria is that the NHIS capitates secondary facilities and tertiary facilities to the detriment of these primary care centers.
Facilities.
And so, rather than people gravitate towards primary care centers, they go to teaching hospitals.
So government needs to direct attention
Yes,
to
they
primary
go to
health.
teaching
That's
hospitals,
what-
for instance.
We don't have time. So
To
what's
go
the
and access
second?
healthcare.
What's the second thing?
The other one is the payment mechanisms you have. The established lawful payment mechanisms in our own version of health insurance are per diem, case payment, fee for service, and capitation that I talked about. Now, like I said, capitation is meant exclusively for general practice doctors. Secondary and tertiary providers like pharmacies, lab scientists, and all of them, and those in that other bracket, are supposed to enjoy what you call fee-for-service. At the inception of the healthcare insurance in Nigeria, the NHI Secretariat, in connivance with the people we call HMOs, came up with an unlawful concept called global capitation.
You know, those are major allegations. But
no, it's not an allegation.
No, you say connivance, as though it was
in collaboration.
Done. Okay. But Mr. Akitayo,
yeah.
I know this.
So you have to redress the payment mechanism.
Okay,
That's all I'm getting at.
Okay.
So that you can secure a buy-in of all a full complement of care providers in the scheme.
Well,
if you don't have their buy-in,
I'm sorry, Mr. Olumide Akitayo, we have run out of time. As I said, we're really going out of time. We want to thank you very much for your time this morning. Mr. Olumide Akitayo is the former president, Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria. He's here with us in the studio, along with Dr. Roland Aigbovo, Publicity Secretary of the Nigeria Medical Association, FCT chapter, and President, Association of Resident Doctors. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning.